wants me to pay attention to him, and by that I mean feed him. But welcome to the Grimm Reader, and to a very casual laid back, so much so that I'm going to drink on camera. Cheers. Tag, namely the Efftup book tag, as you have seen from the intro. Let's get right to the questions, and a couple I don't have good answers to because I'm extremely boring. Hopefully I'll make up for it with some of the other answers. So the first prompt is a book that was effed up in a good way. And so I have quite a few options. It's a wonderful tag that Daniel has created for us from Guilty Feet, because we kind of get to reflect on where our, how far are we willing to go in terms of effed up, and do we like effed up? And what kind of effed up do we like? I definitely like some types of effed up, but I do draw the line pretty strongly, just for my own mental health reasons, at others. So, but it's, it's definitely also mood related, but it's an interesting thing to think about, if you so will. The first one, the book that was effed up in a good way, I'm going to go with this brilliant novel by Christina Stead, The Man Who Loved Children, and it's not that kind of effed up, just in case you're wondering from the title. It's very, the father is, he does sort of, the psychological torment and perhaps abuse of a certain nature, but it's not sort of textbook in any way. It's too complex, and the book is very literary. I mean, but still the family is pretty effed up, and there is one scene of animal cruelty that is, but it's part of, and it was okay for me, even though it did involve a cat, and it's just part of this weird story. So yes, but definitely worth reading. I do recommend this novel. Britta and I read it together beginning of last year, but it does sort of drag you down because it is sort of unrelentingly effed up. The family never, there's no sort of redemption or resolution to the effed upness, I don't think. I mean, unless you could argue that the ending is a little bit like that. I don't know. Anyway, so that's my one example of a good effed up way book. That and so I have a hard time with bad effed up books because I don't really read them. I have a couple of books that I just didn't like, but I'm not sure how effed up they really are. So my two go-to books that I really hated, one of them is A Man Called Over, and he's very popular. So it kind of is veering off into the next prompt, which is the book that everyone loved that you just thought was effed up. But see, I don't know how effed up A Man Called Over is. It's just overrated and bad. And the other one that I do think is borderline effed up is The Elegance of the Hedgehog by, oh, I forgot her name. Muriel, someone, French. And I really didn't like what she did with the character at the end. And even before that, I really had issues with the book. I thought the characterizations were cliche and annoying, and I mean, there's an Asian person in there and it's sort of stereotypical. And the whole idea of this smart lady who's a concierge, and the kid bugged me too. I mean, it's not, I thought the ending was borderline effed up in what she did at the ending. I thought it was kind of unfair and sort of manipulative of us as the readers, but in general it's just a bad book. And also the next question, I'm so sorry, we'll get to the good stuff in a minute, but a sexy F up, I have no good answer because I'm extremely boring. Really sorry. Some of the other people had good answers for that, but I just don't have anything. Let's get into the good stuff. Effed up stuff for kids. So I am the Grimm Reader, and I teach fairy tales. And German literature, sort of purportedly for children, does abound in effed upness of a certain nature. And so the ones that I sort of showed you in the little intro were the 19th century sort of cautionary picture books. And the first one, I'm sorry, I should have pulled it up already. So in German we call him Struwwelpeter, Strovel Peter, so sort of shockhead, crazy-headed Peter, because his hair's all over the place. And so this is 19th century, 1845, by Heinrich Hoffmann, and it's cautionary tales. And each has a clear moral that demonstrates the disastrous consequences of misbehavior in an exaggerated way. And I will link to the story about Paulinchen, who stayed at home and played with matches, and the cats told her, don't play with matches. And you can guess what happens to her. And very influential, and I actually kind of do think they're funny. I mean, it's effed up, but I like them better than the next example of the same ilk in a certain sense, that I think I also have a little snippet from in the introduction, which is another 19th century canonical book in German culture, Max und Moritz, who are also, it's also illustrated, and it kind of morphs into things like, in American context, the Katzenjammer Kids. But I never cared for Max and Moritz because I think they're basically mean juvenile delinquents who deserve to, well, they actually do, something really bad happens to them in the seventh. So it's a story of 7 boyish pranks, and the boyish pranks center on being mean to people and animals, basically. They steal chickens, they steal roasted chickens, they have a teacher smoke a pipe with dynamite in it, so gunpowder, and the uncle's bed they put full of bugs, and then there's something with the baker, and yeah, and I always thought it's just a little bit they're too mean. I don't know. On the other hand, the writing, Bush is talented, and the rhyming trochaic tetrameters, as Wikipedia is telling me, are funny. But it's also, there's a harshness there that I never really, and I came to all of this rather late, because I came to Germany late when I was 12, and then I would watch these and think, So they're all kind of effed up. And then in terms of fairy tales, a lot of the Grimm stuff is effed up, and then you can always sort of have discussions, is it just effed up and kind of, you know, racist or sexist, patriarchal, and there are those stories. But I contend that there are some Grimm stories that are effed up in a great way. And 2 of my favorites are Hans my Hedgehog, which is basically a tale about a hedgehog riding a rooster playing bagpipes who lives in a tree. Love it. And then the other good effed up one, and I have a picture, and it's a wonderful copy or edition of Grimm's Tales illustrated by Morris Sendak, and they're amazing. And it's Fitch's Bird. Fitch's Bird it's basically a feminist fairy tale, like before, you know, avant la lettre. So this, and they're all connected to Bluebeard, which is also, of course, effed up. But Fitcher comes out, and Fitch's Bird refers to the heroine of the story, who has, in the meantime, put together her sisters and sent them home after they had been dismembered by this person, this Fitcher. And her disguise is as this weird life-size bird, because she rolls around in honey and feathers. And Fitcher doesn't recognize it, so it's really, really cool. I really like Fitcher's Bird, and there's an egg in it too, because you gotta have an egg. If it's fucked up, you gotta have an egg. Oh, I actually said it. I'm sorry. I think you can handle it. So yeah, Fitcher's Bird is great. I love it. So that's the kids stuff. I'm gonna get into another kids book, but it's of a different ilk. There are a lot of effed up classics, don't we know? I agree with Sean that Wuthering Heights is completely effed up and completely wonderful, and it is the best Bronte, although I still love Charlotte Bronte's works as well. I don't like Anne's works. Another one that I think is effed up in a great way is Crime and Punishment. I mean, remember the dream sequence with the horse? Or the dinner at the end, the wake? I mean, come on. Completely effed up, but fantastic. I mean, Crime and Punishment was great. I just read it. I listened to it recently. Another classic effed up book that I have a little picture of in the intro is Huysman. Joris Karl Huysmans he wrote a lot of effed up stuff, and it's going into the whole literary decadent movement, which is, and his novel Against Nature is completely fascinating to me, because it's about this person who leaves his very kind of debauched life to basically go and arrange his house in a perfect way. And so it's really, as even the wiki page says, that nothing happens. It's really another novel that's plotless, and it's all about him rearranging the furniture and looking in art books, and really nothing much happens. Something bad happens to a tortoise. But I actually really enjoyed it. And I think that's kind of where my penchant for F-upness kind of sort of goes into the decadent, and see, just as an example of something I can't read or won't read because I just think it's too effed up for me, is Dessart. I mean, it's enough for me to read the synopses and I don't think so. Even though I'm sort of interested in it, and Amin had posted his video where he talks about Angela Carter's book about Saad. So I'm sort of interested in it, but I don't know if I really want to read this stuff, because I don't need to read hundreds and hundreds of pages of extremely graphic and also sort of violent pornography. Life's too short and there are other books to read. On the other hand, I completely understand the fascination, although I am a little bit, like, the French are like, they have museums and they're like, yeah, Dessart. I don't know. It's as if you gotta wonder if they really know what they're getting into sometimes, but I don't know. But the decadent stuff is interesting to me, and going into the aesthete realm. What's interesting about Against Nature, to my mind, is that there's almost an asceticism to his aestheticism, and it's sort of the completely refined life kind of veers away from the overly ornate, or kind of turns into something else, and I think that's kind of interesting. And as I recall, Huysman does sort of become increasingly more conservative and religious, as he sort of literally goes down into, describing satanic stuff. His own morality becomes more mainstream, or at least he becomes more religious at the same time, which is interesting. And it reminds me of another book that I do think is effed up, no question, but I actually kind of enjoyed it. Let me just get it for you. I actually liked Serotonin. I thought it was well written and funny, and I got the humor, and he is an effed up character, but he's also kind of funny. I don't know, I liked him. I mean, even though there's effed up stuff in here too, as I recall. Plus I do love this cover. It worked for me, and maybe because it's French, I don't know. I thought it was quite good. So yeah, another effed up book that I liked. So yeah, for the translation one, well, there's a good example, but then the Hedgehog one would be a bad example. Just a terrible book. I don't have a good nonfiction effed up, because sort of, it's as if it's something about some horrors that really happen, of which there are plenty. That's sort of, it's just awful, and it's I don't know, it's like, it's not part of, for me, there's so much effed up stuff that really happened. But yeah, so I don't read a lot of nonfiction, so I'm kind of like Sean there. Coming to, I think I'm gonna come back to my illustrated effed up, which is kind of, it's also an example of a children's effed up, but I want to skip that one and come back to it and end with that one, because I want to talk a little bit about the last question, which is Hanya Yanagihara's Little Effed Up book, a book that's just misery porn. And see, I'm in the camp of, I'm not going to read, I know enough about I read synopsises of what Little Life is about, and I actually read Goodreads, and I see the reviews of people, and I've decided I'm not going to read that. I'm not going to read that, because I just don't think it's going to have enough the sort of literary, interesting, you know, at least with Huysman, we get, it's sort of, it's Schopenhauer. We have sort of interesting philosophical stuff going on. And I don't think we get that with Low Life, as far as I can tell. It's just pages and pages of this horrific abuse. And we deal with through people being nice to him or whatever. And I actually think I did start it, and I didn't care for the writing that much. And so I don't think I need, and also from what I gather, it's a very harrowing reading experience for most people. Like people saying they need to read something else to cleanse their palate or just put it down because it's so awful and it changed their lives. It's like, I don't think I need to put myself through that because I'm just not that, I don't want to read that. It's as simple as that. On the other hand, I just watched Guilty Feet saying it's a great book and it's about love and kindness. And I know that Leo, you know, I love Leo's channel, and his channel is Little Book Life. So it's funny how I don't think I want to read it, but I respect other people's opinions about it. So that's, so my misery, I don't really have a good example of that kind of story. What I will mention, and so here we're getting into going away from books a little bit, and I do, the people I'm going to tag are welcome to talk about non-book stuff too, because there's a lot of Efftup stuff, for example, with music and film too. And my example of, I know it's a book, but I haven't read the book. And my example of this is a TV show that I have stopped watching because I think it's too, there's another term, misery porn, but there's also torture porn. And it's something about the way it's done, and it's Outlander, which isn't particularly awful, I know, in the big scheme of things. But I just didn't like the way it focused on sort of sadistic abuse or sadistic overreaching. And so we stopped watching it because it really didn't make me feel good. And so I'm wondering if the books are the same way. So if you've read the Outlander books, tell me. That's the only example I can think of that's sort of like that. So, and that's kind of where I don't like that. I don't want to read that. And now for the last book, and it's sort of hilarious, but also frightening. So way back before BookTube and everything, I followed this two librarians who have a wonderful website, and of course now I've lost it here. It's it's about the books they read out from the library. Let me see if I can find it, because that's where I found this book many years ago, and I could not believe that it existed, but it does exist. And I'm also going to post a video to a video called, the title is The Worst Children's Book Ever Made. And let me see if I can find the website of the librarians. Yes, it's actually a really good website. I love it. Awful library books. Hoarding is not collection development, and it's about how the stuff that they weed out. It's weeding, you know, book weeding, what we could call culling. You know, we all do it as booktubers. But the book that I'm talking about was by far the most commented book, and I mean, and it goes back to the overreaching fear of Satanism, I guess, in the 80s, and also the overreaching in the sense of people being wrongly, you know, put in jail, all kinds of awful overreaching. And so the sort of the satanic ritual abuse, overreach, and paranoia led to this book that was apparently written for children, or for parents who may have children who, and it's called Don't Make Me Go Back There, a child's book about satanic ritual abuse. The submitter to the website wrote, I give thee the most awful library book ever. Seriously, I found this little gem a few years ago doing a project for a young adult class, and yeah, not only is the subject horrible, but the storyline is jumbled and the pictures are cheesy colored pencil. And so I'll post some links for you because it's so horrific. The whole thing is just like, the pictures are so creepy, and the whole book is just, because I think it's not funny at all. It's like, it's supposed to be a book to be taken seriously, but it's about, I guess, these daycare people abusing these children. I mean, it sounds terrible. Even saying it sounds terrible, and it is terrible. But, and the pictures are just, I don't know. And let me see. Here's the second part. I will post links to this if you're interested, and it is kind of interesting. I mean, it's just that this book even exists. And I guess it was a whole bunch of books that addressed really, really sad topics. And on the one hand, it's supposed to be helpful, but it's as if don't ever get this to a kid or anything. But yeah. And I can't believe it existed, but now it's sort of become famous as this terrible, terrible book that shouldn't really ever exist. And people going on about how the symbols for the pagan symbols are wrong and everything. It's just, and of course I don't have a copy of this and I haven't read it, but I know enough about it to and then I did find this booktube video. No, not booktube, just a video about, I don't know the channel, I don't know. It's called Weird Explorer, and he has almost 200,000 subscribers, so I guess he does kind of I don't know what he does exactly, but he has a 24-minute video on this book, which I'll link to. Yeah, and then in terms of other effed up stuff, I'm just gonna mention, Rammstein, the German metal group, has some pretty effed up videos out there, including one that yeah, I don't even know if I should say the name of it. It's pretty effed up because it's part of why it's effed up is it's a sort of an artistic rendering of something that actually happened. But yeah, I think that's enough said about that. Let me go ahead and, since we're already over 20 minutes here, I apologize. Let me go and tag some people. I would like to hear, these people do this wonderful prompt. Jer at Drawn to Stories, because I want to hear someone from Finland talked about Efftup books. Jen from Remembered Reads, because I just think she might have some interesting tales to tell on this subject. Maybe not, I don't know. This is the kind of tag where you don't know if people are going to be like, oh, I don't want to do this tag. Sean and Bert from Past Story Time, because I think they'll have great answers. Like Bert and his horror book interest. Yeah, bring it on. I want to hear. And then two people that I've been watching, they had this kind of collaboration where they talked about the struggles of being new booktubers. So Barb and Isabella at the Font. G'day. Fellow somewhat Australian here. And then Kit from Kit's World. Hello. So if they want to do the tag, and if hopefully you're not offended that I'm tagging you in the Efftup book tag, but if you are, I apologize. Thank you all for watching and have a great day. Bye-bye.